Hi, and welcome to Answers News for July 10th. Sorry we're a little bit late today, having some technical difficulties, but I am so excited today and also for Thursday to have Dr. Danny Faulkner, our astronomer here at Answers in Genesis, to talk to us about the question that's been on all of our minds: is the Earth flat? Now, you might be thinking, why do we have to have a Answers News on this topic? Okay, that's kind of the question that I would have asked probably several years ago. Like, of course, everyone knows the Earth is not flat. But even recently, when I was at a conference speaking, a woman came up to me afterwards, and she was in tears. And she said to me, my husband and my sister-in-law believe that the Earth is flat. How can I help them? What are some resources? And I was kind of just standing there dumbfounded, because like, okay. And she said, it's an embarrassment to her, and she doesn't really know how to handle that. And I just keep hearing this more and more, people believing in this. And so, sadly, we do have to talk about it and get our story straight on this and why this is a problem. So, Danny, you've had some experience with this, I know, because he gets way more questions as the astronomer about it than I do. So what's been some of your experience with this?
I had a similar experience about a year and a half ago. In a week's time, less than a week, I had 3 conversations with different adults about young people they knew they were concerned with. And that automatically just raised up all sorts of, okay, there's something going on.
Right.
And I had a tip-off a year or so before that. I'd gotten 6 months, 12 months apart, I'd gotten 2 emails from people linking me to this one video, different videos actually, but a short video promoting Flat Earth, and I didn't really put it together. I thought, okay, that's interesting. I wonder what they're trying to do here. So it's really exploded in the last 2 or 3 years, big time. And I've responded to it. I've written 5 articles on our website over the past 13 months. And I've done one of my personal blogs on it. That was back a few months ago. And in the last year and a half, I've spent a lot of time looking into this. I've looked at unbelievable hours of videos. There are a lot of them out there, thousands, maybe millions of them.
Right.
And it gets repetitive after a while. I have read several of the things that are out there, read a couple of the books that are out there. I wanted to mention 2 people by name particularly. One is Eric Dubay. I've got 2 of his books here. This first one is called The Flat Earth Conspiracy. This one, I still can't quite figure Dubay out. I'm trying to...
Well, that's what I was wondering with a lot of these people that are promoting the idea of a flat Earth, that are, having books and things like this. Are they serious about it? Like, they really believe the Earth is flat? Or are they just trying to do this to see how many gullible people are out there?
I think many of them are very sincere. I've seen many that are absolutely, I'm convinced, are sincere. Dubay, I'm not sure. I go back and forth on. Either he's misled himself or he's intentionally, punking people with this.
Right.
Even the title of his book, The Flat Earth Conspiracy, if he really believes there's a big conspiracy promoting the spherical Earth, then why isn't this called the Spherical Earth Conspiracy? I keep wondering if maybe just the title of the book even is a clue that, hey folks, I'm really joking here. I got to read the first line to you. I cracked me up when I read this mixed metaphor. It says, wolves in sheep's clothing have pulled the wool over our eyes. And I just, again, is that just a clue telling us that he's just playing around? This other book is a little briefer. It's 200 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball. And that's kind of, I think, meant as an update to a guy named Carpenter who wrote a book. It's 100 Proofs 130, 140 years ago. And I don't know, maybe twice as good because they have 200 supposedly. Many of them are repetitious, however, so there really isn't 200, even 100 in the original. The other one I'll mention is Rob Skiba. He's, by the way, Dubay doesn't claim to be a Christian. I think he's probably an atheist. But Skiba claims to be a Christian. He's written a number of books, spoken quite a bit. He's into fantastic things, the Nephilim prophecy. I think this is another one of these things. And Skiba claims that he's not really convinced necessarily. He's just investigating it. But there comes a time to reach a conclusion, Rob, and you haven't. And he's also featured as one of the principal speakers at the first International Flat Earth Conference in North Carolina this November. So if you're really sitting on the fence, why are you out there promoting one side? I think his actions speak far louder than his words do.
Do either of these guys have degrees in any kind of scientific field by which they could effectively evaluate the answer to this question?
No.
Okay.
I mean, that's
that answers that question.
Okay, yeah, pretty simple.
So total non-experts. And one of the things we were talking about earlier, I know, is that a lot of times, you've written quite a bit on this, but a lot of these people that believe in a flat earth only want to watch videos.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they won't read the articles published against these ideas. And I think that's so common among our young people today, and especially our young people. And, well, they just see this wonderfully produced video on YouTube, which is a great source of authoritative information on any scientific topic, as we all know. And they believe it. Well, it's produced well, and these people seem to know what they're talking about, so it must be true. And I think even more, it tells us how discerning we need to be, and teaching our children to be discerning and to really look carefully at these things and not just take someone's word for it who isn't even an authority figure on this topic, talk about it, but really to research it and to look into it. Yeah.
Well, I think I need to describe also what this entails. Their model is what some people call a snow globe Earth. You got a flat, round Earth like this, and then you've got like a dome around it, a vault around it, and everything that happens is inside of all of this. It's like a snow globe, except there's no glitter inside for the snow. All right, and it's also geocentric. Obviously, if everything's contained inside of the sun, the moon, stars, everything inside that vault, then the Earth is not moving, though it's different from classical geocentrism, which we've had to deal with before. And there are no orbiting satellites. You don't have satellites going around the Earth like this. They're all anything else is just moving up here. So consequently, if there are no satellites, then we've not gone to the moon either. And if that's the case, then everything NASA's done for the past 60 years, they haven't done. Everything's fake and fool. Of course, now you got tens of thousands of people involved with this vast conspiracy, the point of which is not very clear. And this all leads then to just very grand conspiracies. People with the
love conspiracy.
Matrix movies, the whole thing. People like to think there's something else going on than what's obvious. So that's kind of an appeal there. And this swerves into what I've been calling in recent years Christian Gnosticism. One of the elements of Gnosticism was a secret belief, secret knowledge, that if you became attuned to those, it leads to a higher spiritual plane.
Well, it's kind of like a lot of what we deal with many times with the BioLogos organization that promotes theistic evolution. They kind of have that, well, you have to listen to me because I can actually read the Bible in its original language, and therefore I know more about these things than you do. Like the Bible isn't plain and straightforward in what it's saying. Now, I'm not saying there's certain more things that can't be weeded out by that. I'm not dismissing that, but I'm saying it's almost like they said, or if you don't know ancient Near Eastern culture, you can't understand what the Bible's talking about. So it's like they have this secret knowledge that you have to listen to them to be able to understand things better. And so we see it in a lot of places, I think.
And I think it ultimately appeals to the pride. I've discovered something you haven't discovered. I know something you don't know. But if you really study and learn like I have, you too can be initiated to that. And so pride will get you there. Unfortunately, pride will keep you there because I've studied this thing quite in depth, and it's really specious. It really is. The thing is, it pulls people in because they deal with topics many people don't know a lot about. And so they're easily swayed if they don't have enough information. And so at some point, if you want to get out of this, you have to admit to yourself that you've been duped, you've been fooled. And that's damaging to the pride. It really is hard.
It's hard to admit you're wrong.
So pride gets you there, and pride keeps you entrapped there. And that's really sad.
Something, too, I should tell people, don't forget to send your little, emojis, because that gets this out there more, and we do want this to be helpful to people, which is why we're doing a sort of a two-part series on this. And the other thing, too, is if you have questions about this topic, one of the things that Dr. Faulkner and I were discussing was, go ahead and put those on there, and we'll kind of scroll through the comments afterwards and see some of the things that we might want to address on Thursdays. Where we're going to talk, today we're kind of talking more about the history of how did this come about, like what are the sort of modern day proponents of it, and then talking about the science behind it and some of the problems with the flat earth, well, a lot of problems with the flat earth science, if you want to call it that.
And I divide the arguments up into 6 basic fallacies are made. One is false information. There are some things out there I've encountered which I blatantly know not to be true. For instance, the one gentleman last year was arguing that the North Star is visible well south of the Earth's equator. Well, having made numerous trips to the southern hemisphere, viewed it from numerous continents and countries, I can tell you, my knowledge of the stars that I've studied for a half century almost, it's not visible from most of the southern hemisphere, barely below the equator, but no deeper than that. That's just simply false information. If you read that out there, it's wrong. Okay, another one is incomplete information. They will give you some information that's correct, but they don't tell you everything that's involved with it. And once you get more information, you find, well, that kind of modifies what the first part was.
It kind of reminds me of, a lot with evolution, you'll see that, is people say, oh, well, this eye could have definitely evolved into this eye over time. And as a geneticist, I'm looking at that going, yeah, but how many genetic changes would have to happen for that to occur? It might look easy when you see it in this nice little video, but the reality behind it is it would take so many genetic changes that just something like that wouldn't even be plausible. So when you get into the details, sometimes that's where it can fall apart.
And a third problem is sometimes they give you reasonably correct information that's but yet improperly interpreted. I watched a video about a month ago, I guess. So this poor fellow had this videoing of boats off some distance, and the hulls were disappeared. You couldn't see them because they're past the curvature of the Earth, and yet he was arguing that this was quite in step with a flat Earth, and he was arguing somehow waterways you couldn't see were blocking your view. It was crazy stuff, but he had the correct information right there, but he was improperly interpreting them. And the fourth way is assertions. People just simply assert things. I've encountered this among the people who deny we've gone to the moon. I first encountered that a decade ago, and my approach there would point out that at least 2 of the 12 men who walked to the moon later came to the Lord in salvation. And you're accusing 2 Christian brothers of lying, one of the biggest things that ever happened to them.
Right.
And their response is stop them in their tracks, typically, but not the flat earthers. The flat earthers just so blithely go on. They just assert that all those astronauts are Freemasons. And that's part of the conspiracy. Well, wait a minute. Whether they are Freemasons or not is a debatable issue, perhaps, but so I can't really...
What does that have to do with...
Well, it's part of the conspiracy, but they haven't proven that any of them are Freemasons. They just simply asserted that, quote-unquote, all of them are, so therefore that proves it in the minds of many people sucked in by this. That's successful argumentation, but it's merely an assertion. You're not even begun to show it's true or not.
Yeah.
And then reason that it's irrelevant.
I had a question. So last night the moon was beautiful here, and it was big and full looking, and I don't know if it was it full moon yesterday or close to full moon?
It was the day after, I think.
Okay,
real
so
close.
it looked very full. So one of the things I was thinking last night, because I knew this was coming up today, I was thinking, so what do flat earthers say about like the moon and other celestial bodies? Because to me, I look at that and I say it looks like a sphere to me. But what do they think about planets and the moon?
The phases of the moon can only happen as we see them if the moon is spherical. It's not only curved this way, but also in the third dimension in our line of sight, and it's being illuminated by the sun. And it's very easy to explain as you take the moon around, it goes from a crescent to a full and back around again. But the flat earthers assert that the moon is not a sphere. It's actually a disk. It has its own light. It doesn't reflect the light of the sun. It's somewhat transparent. You can see through it. All these things are just false assertions, and there's evidence quite contrary to what they argue on this, despite how serious they seem about all this. And it's flabbergasting to deal with this. And the thing is, they just simply run ripshod over the traditional explanation, the correct explanation for all these things. And they try to throw out little factoids here and there again, some false, some partially true, some of them improperly interpreted, all the while throwing pot shots out there. But they never, and I do mean never, explain to you what the phases of the moon are. I mean, they just don't. They just tear down what the other ideas are supposedly, but they don't offer anything.
You can't do that, and that's one of the things even with the evolution and creation model is. It's important to tear down the evolution model and know that it's not true, but then what is true? You have to build the creation model and be able to explain it from that perspective. So that's an important part of it.
And I've counted that a lot. And then fifthly, I find unusual phenomenon passed off as being normal. They'll find some unusual effect that takes place, and then this is passed off, like dealing with lunar eclipses. Maybe talk about that later on, maybe on Thursday. They assert that during a solar eclipse, excuse me, back up. A solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse takes place, and they say that the sun and the moon have been in the sky at the same time. When I first read that, I thought it was like the sun's up here and the moon's up here. That's patently impossible. Then I got to thinking about it, I quickly realized, well, yeah, it is possible, but you have to catch the sun really low as it rises or sets, and the moon really low as it rises. Only for a minute or two can you do that. And so consequently, it's an unusual sort of circumstances. It happens every eclipse if the weather's really good and you're in the right location, everything. But that's hardly a common occurrence. And it is easy to explain in terms of the umbra. The Earth's umbra is larger than the moon is, and so actually for a moment or two, it's possible to see the moon and the sun in the sky at the same time during a lunar eclipse. It happens, but that's just one of those interpreted incorrectly. And then finally, this is a biggie. His most recent article I've put on our website: a total mishandling of Scripture.
That was a really interesting one. As I
yeah.
read through that, I was like, man, I can't believe how they're taking some of these verses just totally out of context.
And twisting them around, and then they try to blithely say that this is what the Bible clearly teaches.
And you can see all of the articles that we're referring to. We've pinned all of Dr. Faulkner's articles at the very top, so you'll see all of those. And we encourage you to read those, okay, and pass those on, because this is someone who's an authority on this particular topic, talking about it and thinking about these things.
Well, the history of this is interesting. It really goes back to the 19th century. It doesn't go any back any
It doesn't go back to Christopher Columbus.
No,
I mean, I thought for sure he thought he was going to... I mean, everyone's heard that, right? That Christopher Columbus thought he was going to sail off, the end of the world.
Well, Christopher Columbus thought he wouldn't, but everybody else thought he would.
Right, yeah.
And the idea we learned this growing up is
Right.
that everybody thought the world was flat, and so if you sailed across the ocean, you hit the edge of the earth, or something like this.
Yeah.
And of course, Christopher Columbus said, since it's spherical, I can go from Spain over to Asia, over here, by going west like this. Didn't know there was North and South
around.
America between.
Yeah.
Now, if you turn it around, look here, it's very obvious that it's a lot shorter to go from Spain to Asia by going east. It's a lot shorter.
Right, yeah.
And that was really the whole question back then. People had known that the earth was spherical for almost 2,000 years at the time of Columbus, 2,500 years ago. The debate, I want to say this again, the debate 500 years ago at the time of Columbus was not over the shape of the earth, it was over the size of the earth. Guess what? Christopher Columbus was wrong. He lowballed and highballed figures and conspired to get it going shorter, going westward from Spain to Asia. As you can see on any globe, that isn't going to work.
That isn't going to work, yeah.
He lowballed and highballed the figures, cooked them to get there. His critics were actually right. Even think about it. Columbus sails from Spain over to the islands over here near the Caribbean, and he goes back to Spain. He does it 3 more times. How does that prove the earth is spherical?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even hold up to scrutiny there.
Sure.
So I used to talk about this in my astronomy class. I'd talk to people and say, well, how do you know the earth is spherical? And most of my students wouldn't have any clue. They could say, well, space photos. Well, yeah, that's fine in the last 50 years, but what about 2,500 years ago, how they do it? And the early theory, early understanding goes back to Pythagoras in the 6th century BC. He realized what caused lunar eclipses. It's a shadow of the Earth falling on the moon. And I have here a little round disc. We've got multiple lights up here, so I can't show it quite as well. But if I hold the thing up like this, you can see from those 3 lights there, I get 3 basically circular shapes.
Right, he does.
So,
you won't be able to see it, but I can see it. So
a round, flat object can actually cast round shadows as long as the sun is coming, light's coming straight down, and the screen's down here. That would happen to the lunar eclipse if it's at midnight, the sun's up here and the moon's down here, or vice versa. What happens if it's sunrise or sunset? I turn it like that, and you're going to get
a disc,
kind of a line across there, a little ellipse. And so the sun's like this, the moon's down here. You're going to end up with not a circle at all.
Right.
Now, I've seen more than a dozen total lunar eclipses. I've seen many other total lunar eclipses. I mean, partial lunar eclipses, and that shape is always a circle. And Pythagoras, 2,500, 6th century BC, over 2,500 years ago, noted that the shape of the Earth's umbra was always a circle. And the only shape that always cast a circular shadow, regardless of its orientation, is a sphere.
Is a sphere, yeah.
Now, by the way, the flat earthers have a good explanation for that.
I'm sure they do.
They say that the lunar eclipse is not caused by the Earth's shadow falling on the moon.
Okay, so what's it caused by?
They don't know. They don't care. Apparently, they never offer an explanation.
See, that's a problem. You can't tear down one model without having another model to support what you say.
Particularly when there's very good, abundant evidence that this model actually does work very well. Just an assertion that it doesn't work, and off they go again. And Eratosthenes, around 200 BC, measured the size of the Earth pretty accurately, and that information was known to Columbus at the time of his voyage, and that information was important. It was used, quoted there. Yeah. Ptolemy wrote around 140 AD this book, now known to us as the Almagest, and it's a lot of people writing, Eric Debye and others try to claim that the ancient astronomers predicted eclipses and all planetary positions and such based on a flat Earth model. That's absolutely false. You can get English translations of Ptolemy's work, and it's very clear in there that he was talking about a spherical Earth. There's no doubt about that. So when I read those kind of things, I think, what planet are they on? They certainly don't know what they're talking about. And this whole thing, and that's one of the 3 points I can make about the 19th century.
Yeah, so like where did this
idea come from?
Because these people obviously believe the earth was round.
Right.
I mean, it's not something from the Bible that doesn't, there's nothing in the Bible that says the earth isn't, a sphere. So where's the debate? I mean, where did this even start?
Well, our faux history we have of, everybody thinking the earth was flat until the time of Columbus really came from the 19th century, the latter part of the 19th century. There were two very influential writers, Andrew Dixon White and John William Draper, and they invented what's called the conflict thesis. They were building on the post-Enlightenment world. The Enlightenment, I think, was a disaster in many respects. They hijacked progress of science and actually a Christian foundation and made it into an atheistic enterprise from there. And the conflict thesis is that there have been a long war between religion and progress, or science. And more specifically, it should be read as Christianity. And in both of their books, they had a long laundry list of how the Christianity had held up progress in the West. In reality, a lot of it's bogus. One of their arguments was that the church had taught that the earth is flat. And the church never, never taught that. There was a man, a medieval scholar back in 1991, his name was Jeffrey Burton Russell, wrote a very important book, I think, called Inventing the Flat Earth. He got tired of this thing being repeated over and over and over again. So he wrote this book, not very long, but it's very well written, easy to read, and well documented that during the Middle Ages, almost nobody believed in a flat earth. The church at the time, Roman Catholic Church for the most part during that time, they didn't teach flat earth.
Right.
They taught Ptolemy, they taught Aristotle, and both Ptolemy and Aristotle believed in a spherical earth. So this all got totally changed in the past 130 years. Everybody's grown up thinking that people thought the earth was flat.
Right.
So if you come along now and you have this misunderstanding of history, then it's very easy to believe then, I guess, that this whole thing about anti-God, anti-Bible, anti-Christianity, and evolution, the foundation was really set when they overthrew the flat earth in terms of the spherical earth. But the history is completely bogus on that. I can't be more emphatic about it. So that played a very important role. Now, a couple other things happened during that time. Modern archaeology began to develop in the 19th century, and a lot of that archaeology was being done in the Middle East. And they uncovered about what they call the ancient Near East, which, as you mentioned before,
we've been very familiar with
A&E for short. And they unearthed a cosmology of a flat Earth.
So this is how ancient Near Eastern cultures view,
supposedly
view
the flat Earth. They encountered unearthed in the archaeology a flat domed Earth, a snow globe, if you will, and this then became the ancient Near East cosmology.
And that's what you see, and I've seen this a lot.
Repeatedly.
Even though I don't know a lot about this particular area, but I've seen Biologos use that a lot to say, well, the Bible borrowed this. This was the popular cosmology at the time. This is what they believed.
And this all ties in with the JEPD theory.
Yeah, you see.
That's the third element coming along in the 19th century. So, yeah, the Bible, the Old Testament was collated or edited or put together in the late first millennium BC,
exile, right.
And they just simply amalgamated all these ideas. Well, first of all, that's a wrong theory, I'm sure. I believe that
we have articles on our website talking about that.
Far earlier than that, but more importantly, this idea of a flat domed cosmology being the A&E cosmology is totally bogus. As it turned out, ensuing archaeological discoveries unearthed many other cosmologies. There is no single A-N-E cosmology. There are many different examples, and so this idea that this is it is wrong. So anyway, you take the JEPD theory along with this bogus flat Earth cosmology, the A&E, and the conflict thesis. You put it all together, and you got a really potent mix of people really ragging on Christianity and the Bible, trying to discredit it.
Well, we see this all. Biologos does this all the time. I've seen that so many times. Them talking about. They'll even show pictures of the cosmology and the dome, the snowball kind of thing that Dr. Faulkner was just talking about. And they assume that you basically have to understand the ancient Near Eastern cultures to be able to understand the Bible, and that the Bible was adopting false scientific. The writers of the Bible were adopting false scientific ideas, and the JEPD. Those are 4 initials for the people that supposedly
Jehovah, Elohim, Deuteronomic, and Priestley. 4 different groups of people.
4 different ways. Yeah, so it's basically saying 4 different
four different narratives they were saying were being come across in Genesis particularly, and so the different parts reflect different belief systems.
Different belief systems. So it's not written by Moses. It's written by much later something else. So like I say, we have articles that explain that in more detail. But
and
again,
what's wrong with it?
It ties in again with that.
So the liberals promulgated this, late 19th century, but conservatives, even somewhere in the middle, that they weren't even embracing it. This whole idea, this showing up in more conservative sources, a fairly recent development. And unfortunately, the flat Earth people, they run to this liberal stuff, this liberal trash, and they say, well, this is they take these depictions of a flat Earth with a dome over top. This is the biblical cosmology, and it's not. It's simply critics of the late 19th century imposing this upon the Bible. And so when people try to claim, the flat earthers try to claim that this is what the Bible teaches, they're filtering that entirely through skeptics and liberals and atheists. And that's just completely wrong-headed to do that.
Yeah. Well, we're getting a lot of comments. Continue to send your little emojis and everything like that, because that helps this get more reach out there, more people seeing this. And we will be archiving this on our YouTube site, because we want people to be able to share this, because if the flat earthers are watching videos, well, here's another one for them to watch, because we wanted to get that information out there and how this has started. And I've been watching the comments a little bit, and so we're definitely getting some interesting ones on here.
If I may kind of go ahead a little bit with what we might talk about on Thursday.
Yeah. Give us a preview.
I did a little test back last summer. The test is, you got this domed Earth sitting here, and the flat Earth, you read their articles, they say that the sun and the moon are 32 miles in diameter, they're disks, and they're 3,000 miles in elevation. So I went out on a last August. Yeah,
sorry.
That's
my mind's trying to wrap itself.
That's their model, and we can test this model. Here's what I did. We're right here. And let's say I look at the sun at local noon, which for us is about 1:45 because of daylight saving time, and the fact that should be in the central time zone, we're actually
doesn't like
in
that
the eastern.
at all.
I don't like that. Yeah. Anyway, so I go out around local noon when the sun is as high up as it can get, and the date I picked was early August, and the angle the sun made at local noon was like 62 degrees, I think, as I recall. So I took a photograph of the thing. I used a Questar telescope we have. Here's the photograph I took, and you can see it's a big yellow-orange ball there. I'll tell you about the Questar.
A ball.
Yeah. It's a Questar Questar telescope. It's got a 1,200 millimeter focal length. I put my SL single lens reflex camera on it. I set the ISO at 100 with the solar filter, of course, on the standard filter on the end of it. And I think it was 1/60th of a second, I believe, or 100th. I can't remember, but I wrote the time down. I had it. And but earlier in the day, I did the same thing. I set the telescope up, and I captured the sun early in the morning.
Okay.
So if this is at noon, early in the morning, it's going to be over here. It's lower in the sky. It's only about 8 degrees up, and obviously I'm closer to it here than I am over here, because it's lower in the sky. Well, actually, here it's 3,000. Here's 3,000 feet, so 3,000 miles. So here I'm closer. Over here it must be, when it's over here low in the sky, it's got to be 8 degrees up. It's got to be really far away. It's a great distance here. And over here, it's much closer to me. So I just simply used simple trigonometry, and I wrote this up in one of the articles we have online. And I calculated what the size of the image should be and compared it to what it ought to be when it was low in the sky, as high overhead. When it's high overhead, it was about 6 times closer to us, according to their model. So
according to their model.
So it ought to be 6 times larger to us, 6 times larger. And
because it's only 3,000 miles away.
Now, if it's 93 million miles away, it doesn't matter, because we're only a few thousand miles.
Right, but I'm saying in their model, the sun's very close.
So the conventional understanding of how the world works is the sun will have the same size when it's high overhead or when it's down low in the sky.
Because it's so far away from
But with the flat Earth model, it would be much smaller. Here's the image. Notice it's dimmer than the other one was. I can see some tree branches here. Same exposure time, same ISO, same telescope, same everything, except the sun is lower. It's redder, and it's also fainter because it's lower in the sky. Compare the two images. Does the top one look 6 times larger than the bottom one? No. Clearly they're the same size. This is a very straightforward, simple experiment. I took their model. I said, here's the prediction of their model. I did the test of the model, and the model ultimately failed. Now, the conventional understanding of 93 million miles away predicts they'll be the same size. They are the same size. This simple experiment then demonstrates, or it's consistent with the conventional model of the sun being 93 million miles away, and it disproves the model of it being 3,000 miles up. So, and there are others I've done too like this.
Okay, but if okay, I'm sorry. I'm having a really hard time with this flat Earth model from the sense of, if the sun's only 3,000 miles away, I mean, we'd all be toast.
Well, how do they explain it's much smaller than normal.
Oh, that's right, because it's only 32 miles across. So yes. It's just really, really tiny, and so, oh my goodness, okay. Like, if it's not enough that the Earth is flat, the sun is really tiny and only a few thousand miles away. So it just seems to, one thing leads to another. It kind of cascades, because if the Earth is flat, other things are different too in the solar system. Okay, interesting. I learned some new things today. Well, so thank you all for joining us, and we'll be back on Thursday, and Dr. Faulkner is going to address some more of the scientific aspects of this and why the Earth cannot be flat. And I know he was even showing me a video this morning of one of the people who believes in a flat Earth and talking about this, and he said, look, what they're saying is not what's appearing on the screen. And I'm like, yes, you're right. Oh my gosh, even I can see that. And so we'll be scrolling through some of your comments and questions, and those that are on topic. I know some people kind of got into some other things, but those that are on topic we'll try to address on Thursday. So we'll see you back then.